What's the best Battle of Britain movie ever made? I'm ranking 10 films that put you right in the cockpit. Some filmed with real Spitfires and Hurricanes, one with a Royal Air Force pilot who actually crashed a camera plane, and another where a former Nazi ace directed the dogfights. Right after the U.S. joined World War II, Universal decided to make a movie about American volunteers who flew for the Royal Air Force. This was 1942, the war's still going, and they're already trying to turn it into entertainment. The movie follows Robert Stack and two other Americans stationed in an all-American squadron in Britain. There's friendships, love interests, the air war, and they even threw in a female pilot played by Diana Barrymore. Except Eagle Squadron didn't really care about what actually happened. They just made things up. Women ferry pilots suddenly flying in combat missions, hospital bombings that never occurred, all this melodramatic stuff that had nothing to do with reality. Of course, the real Eagle Squadron veterans were not happy about it. A lot of them felt like the movie took what they'd actually been through and turned it into soap opera nonsense. The filmmakers did use the right aircraft. There's some Hurricanes and Spitfires from the Royal Air Force, even got a real Messerschmitt Bf-109 in there. Most of the aerial shots came from stock footage or studio effects, and they'd cut in actual combat newsreels to make it feel more authentic. But it's pretty clear the movie cared more about romance plotlines than showing anything real about the war, which is a shame because the actual story of those American volunteers was already interesting. This one came out just months before America even entered the war. Tyrone Power plays Tim, an American pilot who's ferrying bombers to England and decides to volunteer for the Royal Air Force. The movie doesn't pretend to be historically accurate. The timeline's completely mashed up. They've got Dunkirk and the Battle of Britain happening basically at the same time. It's part romance, part adventure, and nobody involved was worried about getting the details right. But what's interesting here is that they actually put serious effort into the flying scenes. They used real period aircraft. You can see North American Harvards and Lockheed Hudsons in the movie. Their recreation of Dunkirk was ambitious enough that some of those shots ended up in documentaries later. They pushed so hard for authenticity with the aerial stuff that it went badly. 2 cinematographers died when a hurricane and a camera plane collided mid-air during filming. That's how far they were willing to go. The movie got an Oscar nomination for special effects, and for what it is, basically a propaganda piece, the aerial sequences are surprisingly solid. Dangerous Moonlight follows a Polish pianist named Stefan who escapes Warsaw after the invasion and joins the Royal Air Force to fight the Germans. The plot mixes war and romance. Stefan marries an American reporter, flies combat missions, and the whole thing ends with him making some heroic sacrifice in a dogfight. It's more sentimental drama than action. Most of the dramatic elements are completely made up. The ending, the amnesia subplot he goes through, all fiction, but the core of it is based on something real. Polish pilots were genuinely some of the best fighters in the Battle of Britain, and the film was trying to show what those men had given up to keep fighting. What people actually remember from this movie isn't the plot or the war scenes. It's the Warsaw Concerto, a piece of music they wrote specifically for the film. It became a hit on its own. People were buying recordings of it. It took on a life outside the movie. Only one Axis pilot ever escaped British captivity during World War II and made it back to Germany. His name was Franz von Vera. And in 1957 they made a movie about him that most people have never heard of. The whole thing plays out like a thriller. He gets shot down over England, captured, and then spends the rest of the film trying to get out. He jumps off trains, cons his way through airfields pretending to be Dutch, even attempts to steal a plane at one point. The British eventually decide he's too much trouble and ship him to Canada. That's supposed to be the end of it. Nobody escapes from Canada and makes it back across the Atlantic during wartime, except von Vera does exactly that. He gets out of the camp, crosses the St. Lawrence River when it's frozen solid, and makes it to the U.S., which hadn't entered the war yet. From there, he gets home. The crazy part is this all actually happened. The movie sticks to the real story and does a pretty good job. They cast Hardy Kruger as von Vera, and Kruger had actually been in the Luftwaffe himself, so when he's playing a German pilot, there's something real there. The aerial sequences used actual hurricanes. The filmmakers hunted down one of the last Hurricane Mark IICs still flying to get the shots right. The Polish pilots who fought in the Battle of Britain had already lost everything twice. Poland fell, then France fell, and these guys kept showing up to fight anyway. Hurricane follows 303 Squadron, Polish flyers who made it to England and had to prove themselves all over again because British command didn't trust them. Thought they couldn't fly, thought they'd be a liability. Turns out 303 Squadron became the highest scoring unit of the entire battle. This one was made on a smaller budget, which meant most of the dogfights had to be CGI. You can tell sometimes there's only a few actual Hurricane replicas for the close-ups and the digital work doesn't always hold up. But they got the aircraft looking right, and more importantly, they didn't mess with what actually happened. It's a pretty straightforward movie that does what it sets out to do, show what those pilots accomplished. Angels 1-5 was the first major British film about the Battle of Britain, and it came out just 7 years after the war ended. A lot of the people making it had actually been there. The story follows a new pilot who crashes his Hurricane on day one and gets benched. Instead of flying, he ends up working in the operations room. That means you're seeing both ends of the battle, the guys in the air and the people on the ground trying to coordinate everything in real time. The script came from a book by Pelham Groom, who'd been a wing commander in the Royal Air Force during the actual battle. He advised on the film too, which is why it gets details right that other war movies miss. They filmed scenes in the real underground command center at Uxbridge, the same room where the actual battle was coordinated. The problem was, by 1952, almost all the Hurricanes were gone. The production team scrambled to find a handful, they even borrowed some from Portugal, but for most of the flying sequences they had to use stock footage from the war. Most Battle of Britain movies are about the pilots. This one's about the guy who built the plane they flew. Leslie Howard made a movie about R.J. Mitchell, the designer behind the Spitfire. They made up some stuff, of course. There's a scene where Mitchell meets Willie Messerschmitt and they have this conversation about their competing designs. Never happened. And they show Mitchell dying from exhaustion and overwork when it was actually cancer. But those are small things. What's remarkable here is the flying footage. They got actual film of Mitchell's Schneider Trophy seaplanes, the record-breaking racers he built in the 20s that led to the Spitfire. And for the test flight scene, they had Jeffrey Quill fly a real Spitfire Mark II. Quill had been Mitchell's test pilot, the guy who actually flew the prototype. They also cast real Royal Air Force pilots who'd fought in the battle in small roles. And yeah, it's a propaganda piece, but it's also got real planes and real heroes on screen. Two Czech pilots escaped Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia and joined the Royal Air Force. There's a love triangle, some tragedy, the usual dramatic stuff, but underneath that is something real. There were actual Czech squadrons in the Royal Air Force, 310 and 312, made up of guys who fled when Germany took over. The British didn't fully trust them at first, figured they needed to prove themselves. The movie shows that, and it's accurate. These pilots had to earn their place. The filmmakers wanted authentic Spitfires and period-correct everything, but they didn't have the budget for it. So they cobbled together footage from wherever they could find it. There's archival film, scenes borrowed from the 1969 Battle of Britain movie, some stuff from Memphis Belle, and CGI to fill in the gaps. It's a Frankenstein approach, but it works. Unless you're looking for it, you don't notice the seams. Douglas Bader crashed in 1931 and lost both legs. Then he taught himself to walk on artificial limbs, fought to get back in a cockpit, and by 1940 he was leading a Hurricane squadron in combat. Kenneth More plays him in Reach for the Sky. The movie covers his rehab, his battles with Royal Air Force bureaucracy, his big wing tactics. They soften him up a bit. The real Bader had a temper and swore like crazy, but the story's mostly accurate. The film came out just 15 years after the war. Spitfires and Hurricanes were still around, so they borrowed them from the Royal Air Force in museums. They put together a fleet of Spitfire Mark 16 that looked almost identical to the wartime versions, and they had at least one working Hurricane for the ground scenes. And of course, at number 1, I got Battle of Britain. This came out for the 30th anniversary, and they wanted to do it right. No single hero, no tight focus. They covered the whole thing. France falling, the bombing campaign, both sides of the command structure, all the major turning points. The producers went out and hunted down real Spitfires and Hurricanes. For the German planes, they used Spanish-built aircraft that looked close enough. At one point, they'd assembled the 35th largest air force in the world just for this movie. Every aerial sequence uses real planes. There's no models on screen, no tricks. All you see is real aircraft flying actual maneuvers. That's why the dogfights look better than anything filmed before or since. Guy Hamilton directed, but here's the craziest part. They brought in Adolf Galland as a military advisor. Galland was a Luftwaffe ace who'd actually fought in the battle. So you've got a German fighter pilot helping make a British film about the battle where the British beat him.